It's rare that a business can thrive in both a booming economy and a recession. Uber finds itself in an interesting crossroad where it draws dual directional benefit in both of these market dynamics. Welcome to the Market Framework, where I cover everything from macroeconomic events to individual companies. So looking at this first chart here, we can see that Uber's current price to earnings ratio is sitting around 10. This is extremely undervalued, especially when compared to its primary competitors in DoorDash and Lyft. Later in the video, I'll do a deeper dive into the reasons as to why Uber's current share price is so low. But personally, I don't think that these reasons are enough to justify the current valuation of the company, and I think it presents buyers with an extremely attractive opportunity. All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about the valuation of Uber, let's dive into my original claim in that Uber is successful in both a bull and a bear market. So let's start off with a bull market. So in a bull market, obviously you're going to have low interest rates. As you can see right now, the current interest rate is 3.75% as it was recently cut by the Fed. In my opinion, I think interest rates will continue to be cut, especially if Kevin Hassett is elected as Fed next year. I have a very in-depth breakdown about why I think that rates will continue to fall next year. If you want to learn a little bit more about that, you can check out my first video. But lower interest rates would promote consumer spending as borrowing is easier and cheaper, especially Uber, where their sales are dependent on what is called discretionary spending, which are just non-essential costs that consumers use to purchase things like Uber Eats or ride sharing. So put simply, in a bull market, lower interest rates will cause consumers to have more capital for discretionary spending. More spending means more gross bookings in both ride-hailing and delivery, benefiting Uber. So in a thriving economy, it's kind of self-explanatory to see how Uber would benefit. But in a recession, more factors come into play. In the most recent job report released in November, you can see that unemployment surged to 4.6%. Although this was regarded as not as extreme as analysts had expected, it is still the highest that unemployment has been in 4 years. Furthermore, when this data was released, current chairman of the Fed, Jerome Powell, even said that due to the government shutdown, the data could be overestimating the current amount of jobs in the United States, stating that the data might have ostensibly added 60,000 jobs. Another metric shown in the November jobs report are unemployment claims. Unemployment claims are financial help from the government when you've been unemployed for a certain amount of time. The amount of unemployment claims increased to 1,974,000 in November. This means that once people are laid off, it is becoming increasingly harder for them to find another job, and they are remaining unemployed for extended periods of time. So why does unemployment matter regarding Uber? During a recession, when more people are laid off, they resort to what is known as gig working. A gig worker is an independent contractor who earns income through temporary, freelance, or on-demand work. Some of the most common types of gig working is food delivery and transport. In the baby blue is platform gig workers by millions. In the royal blue is Uber's gross bookings revenue. As you can see, from 2020 to 2021, when we were in a recession due to the pandemic, the amount of platform gig workers rose. Subsequently, Uber's gross bookings revenue also rose. This is because when more people resort to gig work, that means there is more driver availability for Uber. More driver availability offsets the lower capital that consumers have for discretionary spending, resulting in Uber's gross revenue to continue to rise. So to summarize how Uber has dual directional benefit, if interest rates continue to fall in 2026, consumers will have more money to spend on Uber's products. If unemployment continues to rise and we enter a recession, the amount of platform gig workers will increase Uber's driver availability, resulting in cheaper prices for Uber customers. Now let's talk a little bit about the competitive nature of the ride-hailing landscape. Uber has emerged as a dominant ride-hailing app in 108 out of 171 countries analyzed by SimilarWeb. As you can see, all of the dark blue is where Uber is a predominant ride-hailing app in that geography. It's important to notice that big markets such as China in baby blue, as well as Southeast Asia in turquoise, have a major monopoly over their respective regions. It might be easy to cut to a conclusion and say that Uber is missing out on massive profits from these geographies. However, that is not the case. Uber has made an effort to expand their app into these regions, but due to law and cultural differences, they have not found success. Instead of wasting capital and spending more and more on becoming the predominant player in these regions, Uber is taking a more conservative approach and investing in companies like Didi and Grab, who are the major players in these areas. Uber has a 13.7% stake in Grab in Southeast Asia and a 29% stake in Didi, who operates in China. This global dominance is something that gives me a lot of faith in Uber as a company, especially when it comes to autonomous vehicles, which I'll cover next. Autonomous vehicles is where a lot of hype lies and also a lot of concern lies regarding Uber. Bears would say that whoever creates the predominant autonomous vehicle will just create their own app and knock Uber out of the equation indefinitely. I'll cover this concern a little bit later, but right now let's talk about how Uber is in the autonomous vehicle space. Currently, Uber has over 20 autonomous vehicle partnerships that position them well to benefit from this emerging market. Notable partnerships include Lucid, NVIDIA, Waymo, Nuro, May Mobility, WeRide, Momenta, Pony AI, Wave, Stellantis, and Avride. Rather than manufacturing the AVs themselves, Uber is focusing on being the major ride-hailing platform used for as many AV players as possible. Uber offers a decade of user data and has 80% of North American ride-hailing market share, positioning themselves as a wise partnership for aspiring robo-taxi companies. So the obvious question that I raised a little bit earlier is that if a company like Waymo or Tesla were to create an amazing autonomous vehicle that has the majority of market share, why wouldn't they just create their own app and knock Uber out of the equation? An optimistic forecast is that by 2035, 50% of the taxi space will be run by autonomous vehicles. Although I think this estimate is overly optimistic, we'll go along with it. Assuming that 50% of taxis are robots by 2035, you're still going to need an app and an interface that knows when it's best for you to be paired with either a human driver or a robot. There are just certain situations that autonomous vehicles will not succeed in. For example, if you're at a concert or a sporting event, you're going to have unpredictable traffic that simply cannot be predicted by algorithms made by companies like Waymo or Tesla. Uber has a decade of experience and it already knows how to pair consumers with either a robot or a human driver. I think it's extremely improbable that a company like Waymo or Tesla could create their own app, know when it's more appropriate to pair you with a human or a robot, and have the same kind of data, knowledge, and consumer trust that Uber already has. One of Uber's biggest assets is their data and knowledge over 10 years of how people move, where they go, and where they are. As an autonomous vehicle company, you're going to need to know where to position your vehicles, and that is something that can only be accumulated through time, which Uber has. One of the last points I want to cover is how Uber is doing a great job of expanding their robotaxi business globally. As seen by the royal blue dots, Waymo has the dominant market share in the US. However, their global presence is nothing more than mediocre. They only have 2 locations in which their robotaxis are being used outside of the US. In the orange and red dots, you can see all of these companies that Uber is partnered with. They have locations all across the globe where autonomous vehicles are being utilized. Global presence in autonomous vehicles is a major market, as regulations within the US can often limit the amount of vehicles that companies like Waymo and Tesla can deploy. In other geographies, regulations are often a lot less strict, allowing for more autonomous vehicles to be implemented and used. Now let's talk a little bit about Uber's earnings report. They crushed earnings. Gross bookings increased 21%, year-over-year trips increased 21%, and trips per monthly active platform consumer rose 4%. To see an increase so sharp in gross bookings, as well as monthly active platform consumers, it means that Uber is not only growing at a rapid pace, but also keeping their consumers, resulting in recurring revenue. Also, memberships like Eats Pass and Uber Pass increased 60 million, which is 36% year over year, a great source of recurring revenue. That's all I got. If you guys have any questions, make sure to comment down below. Also, let me know if you like these individual stock breakdowns better or if you like the macroeconomic videos more.